Hello, my name's Steve Barrett. I'm the editor-in-chief of PRWeek. Delighted to be here with Maril MacDonald, who's the founder and CEO of Gagen MacDonald. Maril, welcome. Great to speak with you. You're a Chicago-based agency, and you've got a very distinct sort of focus in the things that you do, and that kind of informs some of the trends you're seeing in what's going on in communications. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what the major trends you're seeing and how they're playing out in the work that you do?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Steve. And as you know, our firm, Gagen MacDonald, focuses in the business transformation space. We really work with leaders on really figuring out authentically who are we as an organization and how do we engage our employees to show up at every point of contact in that real way. So many of the things that we've been seeing over the last many years, and we're hearing many people talk about at the Arthur Page Society, the Institute for Public Relations, is the whole recognition that reputation really is all about who we are, not who we want to say we are. Yeah. And of course, with all of the trends that we all know about with social media, transparency, etc., that's never been more true than it is today. Even if we tried to pull ourselves off as something different, now we just get caught faster, right? Yeah. So,
and that kind of informs that, when people talk about communications problems, they're not necessarily communications problems, they're business problems.
No, that's
and the communications function ends up kind of clearing up afterwards. But what you're saying is if you instill communications earlier in the process and through the organization, you can avoid that down the line.
Right, and also if we help one another as leaders and as all employees to really get clarity around what are we really all about, we have a much better way of understanding how to make decisions and show up all the time. So, you mentioned this about it being a communications problem. This is, always one of my real bugaboos is that many of us get called into a room and it's, Steve, we have a communications problem. It's like, no, we have a problem. Yeah. And that problem stems from who we are and how we behave and what we're doing every day. So as communicators, and you mentioned, we have an opportunity to really align everyone around where we want to go. But we also have an opportunity to really help leaders communicate their vision, their purpose, their path, to communicate to people in a way that people can actually get confidence and belief and know how to show up. And so what does that mean? Well, that's very different if we think about our job is running an organization, because what I usually focus on is inside an organization. If our job is to run the organization versus report on it, then the kind of skills that we're looking for are much broader. We still want to be fabulous writers, great storytellers, which is critically important. But now we need to help leaders be great storytellers.
And do you think that message is getting through? There's this whole cliche about being at this, the top table and the C-suite. It is a cliche for a reason, in that we want to get senior executives on board with the comms message. Do you, over the years you've been preaching this message, which, like you say, other people have caught up to now as well, have you seen the C-suite recognise more, the need for that comms to be embedded in everything they do?
I think, one thing I want to come back to is you mentioned a comms message. I don't think there's a comms message. There's a business message. And I'm sure I'm not trying to criticize you.
No.
But I think that's an important point for all of us because we all tend to talk that way. And how we talk actually influences how leaders think about it. And so in terms of being at the table, I think there are many instances where we should be the table. That we are leaders too, and often too many communicators talk about the business people. We're business people, and we're executives, and it's our role to really be thinking about the greater purpose of the business. The CEOs that I work with call Steve to the table not because Steve's a PR pro or a finance pro or an HR pro or an IT pro, because Steve is a business guy who gets it. And Steve can help me knit it together. And what's interesting is in those who sit in a communication role have greater span and visibility on what's going on in an organization than any other function. So we should be the ones who are there all the time. And the CEOs that I work with want it. It's not always happening because they don't necessarily feel they're getting it from the person that they're turning to, so they turn to someone else. But I do not know a CEO that doesn't want the very best counsel from the broadest perspective. And somebody, we hear a lot of the term of wanting to see around corners. Bring me somebody who can kind of see where it's all going and then help me figure out how to navigate it.
And then one of the trends that you're seeing is that requires sometimes an ability to step back and think deeply, whilst also moving quickly in other ways. So there's a need for speed, but also sometimes we're getting so caught up in reacting quickly that we forget you need to step back sometimes and take a moment and think about the best thing to do.
Right, and this is something we were talking about earlier, that one of the trends that all companies are facing is the need to move more quickly. We need more speed. Many companies I'm working with, they're instilling that as part of their culture. How do we make decisions more quickly? How do we go to market more quickly, reduce our cycle times, all of that. But what is fascinating, and what you're alluding to, is that actually, I think one of our key roles as communicators is going to be to slow people down, to really get them to think, to find ways and interventions of having dialogue that allow people to roll around in something and mess with it, because there's a lot of neuroscience that tells us that our brains don't really even recognize something as real till we've messed with it. So we need to find ways to let people mess with it, to let them mess with our strategy. So often we do a beautiful document, we roll out a strategy, a lot of decks and PowerPoints and all those crazy things, and then we wonder, why don't people get it? They don't get it because they never had a chance to own it. So that's a huge opportunity, and I think a real responsibility for us, because communication isn't about what goes out, it's about what comes in.
And finally, I mean, what you do and what PR companies do increasingly, is consultancy, isn't it? And it's the territory that might have been seen as McKinsey or, Bain. Probably not a name that people talk about much at the moment, but where do you sit in that sort of list of services? Mm-hmm. And what can a company like a PR company or like your firm offer that maybe the management consultancies don't?
Yeah, well, our firm is an management consultancy. So, but the difference between Gagen MacDonald and McKinsey, for example, is McKinsey's focus is primarily on the analytics and the research of what business should we be in, what's our strategy, how do we go to market. What we focus on is the human struggle of making that strategy come to life. So we often work with a McKinsey or Bain or others who've come up with a great path for a company, but now how do we talk about it in a way that people get it? How do we get them interested and excited about it? How do we help them make the kind of choices they need to make to bring it down to the bottom? And what we're really looking at is how do we eke out the value from that strategy? Yeah. So that's really where we fit. And how we relate to many other firms is that we use a lot of communication approaches and techniques to do that, right? Storytelling, engagement activities, how we really connect the dots for people. But there are many levers you have to pull in terms of really getting an organization to shift in a really big way.
Okay, well, we're devoting a whole issue to reputation next year, so we'll look forward to investigating that more, and we cover it throughout the year anyway. But it's been great to chat, and we look forward to following your progress in 2013.
Great to talk to you. Thanks for the great questions.